Welcome to UPSC AKHADA. This is the second video of the mains 2022 solution of psychology optional. Thank you for your great response for the first video. Now moving further, this is the question number 5, which is also mandatory. So the 5A question is discuss the significance of the single blind and double blind procedure for establishing the soundness of the experiment. So here there are two keywords. First one is the significance and other one is the soundness. So first thing, what not to do. Don't narrate or explain the procedures single blind or double blind. This is not asked. The question is, what is the significance? Why these two different procedures are used to make experiment sound? And what do you understand with soundness? Because an experiment has 3-4 different criteria to make it sound: reliability, validity, objectivity, empirical basis establish करना. So these are the aspects of soundness. इनमें से कुछ पे ये सिंगल ब्लाइंड और डबल ब्लाइंड हेल्प करते हैं एस्टेब्लिश करने में. सो हमें ये ही रिलेशनशिप एस्टेब्लिश करना है इस आंसर में. सो इन इंट्रोडक्शन वी जस्ट एक्सप्लेन कि जो साइकोलॉजी के एक्सपेरिमेंट्स है वो नेचुरल साइंस से डिफरेंट क्यों है. बिकॉज here subjects are not passive. For example, in biological sciences, we used to do experiments on guinea pig, rats. So more or less, we can treat them as passive. But here humans are there. उनके अपना thought process है, adjustments है, constructions है, जो कि impede कर दें psychological research arrangements को. तो इससे बहुत से biases आ जाते हैं. उन चीज़ों को कम करने के लिए हम single blind और double blind procedures use करते हैं. Now coming to again the structure part. मैंने आंसर को दो aspects में तोड़ लिया है. First, significance of single blind and then significance of double blind. And then talking about the single blind, so what is this a single blind means? Only participants are not aware what's going on in the experiment. रीज़न क्या है कि जो डिमांड कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स हैं, डिमांड कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स होती क्या है कि जो एक्सपेरिमेंटर अपने क्यूज ड्रॉप करते हैं जिससे जो सब्जेक्ट्स हैं, जो पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं, उनको आइडिया लग जाए कि क्या होने वाला है या क्या हो रहा है एक्सपेरिमेंट में. सो वो उसी हिसाब से बिहेव करते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल सोशल डिजायरेबिलिटी बायस है, एक्सपेक्टेंसी है, प्लेसिबो इफेक्ट है. सो ये डिफरेंट डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स हैं जिसकी वजह से जो इंटरनल वैलिडिटी है किसी भी एक्सपेरिमेंट की वो कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ हो जाती है. फॉर एग्जांपल एग्जांपल्स आर मस्ट. और कभी भी जब रिसर्च मेथड्स और साइकोलॉजी की टेस्टिंग के क्वेश्चंस आए, ट्राई टू गिव एम्पेरिकल एग्जांपल्स. एम्पेरिकल एग्जांपल्स मतलब जो पहले जो वेल फाउंड रिसर्चेस हैं उनमें जो मेथड्स में जो प्रोसीजर्स फॉलो किए गए थे उनको मेंशन कीजिए अपने आंसर्स में फॉर बेटर मार्क्स. सो फॉर एग्जांपल इन ऐश कॉन्फॉर्मिटी एक्सपेरिमेंट, तो पार्टिसिपेंट्स को ये नहीं बताया गया था कि ये कॉन्फॉर्मिटी के लिए टेस्ट है. इट्स अबाउट अ विजन एक्सपेरिमेंट. सो दैट if they come to know कि ये conformity का test है तो they should have behaved accordingly. So this is the way to minimize the possibility of demand characteristic by not telling what's going on in the in the experiment by using single blind procedure. Now moving further, coming to double blind. इसमें ना ही तो participant को पता होता है ना experimenter को. So in this case, both are unknown what's going on. Means experimenter means whosoever are taking part on the behalf of researchers. So in this case, placebo effect और experimental expectancy effect भी कम हो जाता है. Placebo effect means there are two groups. One is experimental group, other one is control group. So experimenter is not going to know कि कौन सा control group और कौन सा experimental group है. Like इसको हमने कोई ड्रग इंड्यूस कराया डिप्रेशन चेक करने के लिए और इसको सिर्फ सिंपल सलाइन दिया है. So he knows that कि इसको इस पे कोई इफेक्ट नहीं आने वाला. So automatically his behavior towards them changes. So and it will going to impact the validity of the test or the research. So to prevent it, both are unknown to the aim, objective, or the procedures of the research. We discussed this, the significance of both. Then you can make a simple flow chart. You can make it by on your own. Like I thought कि कैसे बना सकते हैं तो what could be the significance? In general, we have to reduce the confounding variables, which may be demand characteristics, social desirability factor, experimental expectancy, etc. हमें इसी को reduce करना है जिससे इंटरनल वैलिडिटी एस्पेक्ट जो है साउंडनेस ऑफ एक्सपेरिमेंट का वो अपहेल्ड हो सके या हम उसको रिस्टोर कर सके. सो दिस इज द फ्लो चार्ट एंड इन द एंड कंक्लूजन. Here I discuss about the caution because there are some ethical dimensions in blinding procedures also. So when we unblind them, we should tell this was the experiment and knowingly we didn't tell you because इससे हमारे एक्सपेरिमेंट की वैलिडिटी कंप्रोमाइज होती. फॉर एग्जांपल मिलग्राम के जो ओबीडियंस वाला रिसर्च था उसमें बताया गया था कि वो मेमोरी टेस्ट है, बट अगर but it was unethical because it was done in 1945. So but there was ethical issues. So हमें ethics का भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए blending procedures में. So making the gist of the whole answer, we introduced what interactions in psychological testing. Then we come to the body part significance of both single blind and double blind. And we mentioned the keywords, demand characteristics with examples, empirical examples, the placebo effect, experimental expectancy effect. Then we draw a flow chart, and in conclusion, we give the caution कि ethical dimensions का भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए. So by this way, this is the more or less a complete answer with good structure, presentation, flow chart, examples. So this is the way you should write answers in real-time scenarios. Second question, how do psychologists conceptualize creativity and explain the confluence approach to creativity? So first thing is keyword is conceptualize in the first part, and second one is simply explanation of the confluence approach to creativity. So in this answer, the first part is knowingly a little bigger because I just want to give you some content on this, because conceptualize means how it evolved, how the concept of creativity in the world of psychology evolved. So I started with the explanation or the definition of creativity. It should be original and adaptive, and give some examples. What are the creative examples like Kalidas, Ramcharitmanas, Einstein's theory of relativity, Darwin's origin of species? So these are various examples of creativity. As the roots of psychology is philosophy also, so I started with that only. The religious roots for creativity की वो they talk creativity as concept of genius. Even Roman mythology or Greek mythology, so they call it any creative guy a genius person. Then I switched to evolutionary theory. So evolutionary aspect of psychology said कि variations and natural selection process decide करता है कोई कितना creative होगा. Like Darwin called it selection pressures. Then these two phenomena, variation and selection, decides how human creativity takes place. Then Mr. Galton comes in. He talks about initially the natural ability. Then he talks about the nature and nurture aspect in the creativity paradigm. And there is another aspect which is quite famous और ये movies में बहुत famous होता है, mad genius hypothesis. जो creative लोग हैं वो पागल से होते हैं, मतलब they are also anti-social elements also. Freud called them sick souls. And this is the, you can say, villains of movies, brilliant but antisocial, even psychopaths. फ्रॉइड ने क्रिएटिविटी को डे ड्रीमिंग से भी बहुत रिलेट किया है. So these two aspects he discussed. One thing to note about, I always underlined or highlighted the keywords because I'm writing this answer into para format. So in para format, the keyword should be clearly visible. Then Gestalt psychologists, they bring in the concept of insight learning in problem solving situation. We all know that. What about the Keuler gems? How he developed the insight to solve a problem. What Heimer talked about the productive thinking related to creativity. It's all, creativity is evolving, but how we measure it. So there are different approaches in psychometrics. Like Mednick talk about the remote association test to check creativity. Then Mr. Guilford gave the concept and very famous concept of divergent thinking, and the test related to his unusual uses test. And the three aspects we all know: fluency, flexibility, and originality. And then term and termites are there. In that, he talks about the how longitudinal study brings the conceptual clarity over the creativity also. So we also discuss about the IQ test. And the most important and the most famous nowadays is cognitive psychology, the experimental study of creativity. They discussed the processes behind creativity, how creative insights developed during the incubation period. So they want to establish the empirical demonstration of the intuitive information processing कि cognitive unconscious क्या है, the feeling of knowing वाला जो stage है, वो how the neural networks works there. And now the recent approaches, they are creative cognition approach. It says कि कोई special process नहीं होता है creativity में. These are the simple application of ordinary cognitive processes, but repetitive expertise होती है. Any expert who is creative has exceptional expertise in a given domain that he gains. Or whenever we talk about anything, so we have to end with computer programs or AI in any domain of psychology. So computer programs was also there, which are simulating the creative works of behavior, art, literature, music. So they just want to not only simulate the work but also the mental processes behind them. And to end it, I still we are in limbo in the two broad dimensions of creativity. One is the biological phenomena, okay, how the mental structures or neural networks changes when the creative works come. Also the social phenomena, in what kind of environment or in what kind of culture creativity is maximum, or how can we reap creative generations. So these are the aspects we still need more research. And coming to the second aspect is a very direct question from Baron only. So it is nothing but to converge all the different dimensions of cognitive psychology, of socio-cultural aspect of psychology, personality aspect also. So they say कि इन सब का मिश्रण होना चाहिए एक क्रिएटिविटी के लिए. लुबार्ट ने बोला था there should be intellectual abilities, knowledge भी होनी चाहिए कुछ, certain styles of thinking होना चाहिए, which should be novel ways, personality attributes होना चाहिए, and intrinsic and task force focused motivation, not result focused कि मुझे मतलब result focused, or you can say the ego motivation because I have to come first. No, it's about I have to do this task and I'm enjoying this task, that the pleasure principle is there. और एक environment होना चाहिए. And in conclusion, I just concluded the above words in different language only. So this is the second answer. So in this answer, I use the para format. In para format, one thing we should always remember that keyword should be highlighted properly so that the visibility of the answer is clear and crisp, and use short paragraphs because in bigger paragraphs there's a difficulty of comprehension, and the content we should use which should be quite empirical. I referred to three different sources to get the gist of the, the concept of creativity, and the second part is bit straight from direct from a book. Now switching to the third 5C. This is from the personality chapter. Do we need 16 factor to describe human personality? Illustrate your answer in the light of big five factor theory. So this question is a bit analytical, थोड़ा सा time consuming था, but if we know 3-4 attributes of both theories, Cattell's 16 factor and this Ocean theory, so I try to answer again. I use the para format here because there are 4-5 different aspects I can discuss about, and then I simply summarized it. Initially, I defined what is personality, then I directly switched to what is the need. So 16 factor is both are psychometric approaches based on factor analysis, but it uses more profound factor analysis aspects and more in-depth study of traits are there. So we can study this, like we can study the personality from the from 16 factor approach, and the psychometric theorists like Cattell has derived the 16 factors from different uh, because it has surface traits and it also the beneath different 16 factors, and it use different personality tests like P data, L data, T data. These are the, you can say, simple questionnaires, interviews. So these are different methods used in these tests, and then this assessment of these 16 factors took place. So in Big Five, this is a bit lacking. It only talks about these five and the based on survey and all, and the correlation with the action criteria, because these psychometric tests on all these tests are based on some attribute shown by the person in question. So the action criteria, if we talk about, तो 16 factors का ज़्यादा होगा 5 से. So we can study personality from 16 factors angles. Again, nomothetic approach. Nomothetic means behavior is seen as a consistent due to enduring personality traits. कि enduring personality traits हैं. That's why we tend to see the personality from a consistent aspect, not on the individual differences aspect. So उस aspect maybe this is more profound than Big Five. And the another aspect is lexical hypothesis, that every aspect of individual personality can be described by existing English word. So traits are nothing but English words के extra version है. So it's a English word only. So यहाँ पर 16 अंग्रेजी के वर्ड, अब वहाँ 5 है. So this is relatively better. And Kettle also talks about the inheritance, or these Big Five also talk about that. So inheritance के aspect से भी they are fine. And one of the biggest contention in Big Five is that Big Five are meant to be orthogonal, means uncorrelated. But if we go for further factor analysis, all five may merge or positively correlated. So उनमें से भी कोई एक या दो factors निकल सकते हैं. So if you say the size is an issue, then even 5 is also big compared to 1 or 2 factors. And Cattell has also the surface traits which arrive like XVI, NVI, and anxiety, which arises from these 16 factors. So it also gives some broader traits like Big Five. So studying from the aspect of 16 personality factor is also fine. So we can say that cultural acceptance भी है, around 40 countries के around भी 16 factor theory की acceptance है. और Big Five में specific individual differences relatively less हैं, because वहाँ 16 factors है, यहाँ 5 factors है. तो we can say 16 factor और psychometric aspect में भी 16 factor का use किया जा सकता है personality को study करने में. So it's a bit analytical question. I took a lot of time to conceptualize these points. Hope you find it relevant. And moving to the next question is 5D. Discuss the techniques to assess the patient's memory disorders. So it being in paper 1, we can say it's from memory chapter. So memory disorders, इसको हम basically 3 aspects में देख सकते हैं. One is dementia, another is amnesia, and third one is simple forgetting. It is little mild cognitive aspect is there, These are severe cases of memory disorders. So if you talk about amnesia, amnesia basically like retrograde or anterograde might be some accident issue. So we use technique like fMRI or PT scans to diagnose कि brain के किस part में injury हुई है. That's why the amnesia happened. For dementia, there are various aspects which are discussed here. So there are four broader dimensions in which the memory disorders are assessed. One is cognitive impairment, which I talked about amnesia. One is functional disability. One are behavioral changes, and last one is quality of life. For example, this abbreviated mental test score. So it was done by Hodgkinson in 1972. So it assesses the orientation, registration, recall, concentration, and which gives score up to 10, maximum to 10 or 6 or below. So this is a very quite effective screening for dementia. So if the question is about techniques, so you can say these are the techniques: orientation, registration, attention, calculation, recall, language. For example, orientation is time, space perception. What is the year, season, date, day, month, kab hai? Or recall means ki three objects learned previously. So these are the ways we assess the memory of the subject or the patient. And another one is clock drawing. Clock drawing means in a very short span, the patient has to draw the clock with numbers and hands, and time given is very less. So it's a fair assessment tool to or technique to judge one's memory disorders. These two are from the cognitive impairment side. Now the functional disability is Bristol activities of daily life scale. तो ये 20 different daily functions को check करते हैं कि based on memory he is fine or not. Next one is neuropsychiatric inventory by Cummings et al. So it assesses the range of behaviors कि क्या behavior जिससे पता चले dementia है या नहीं. Now short form 36. This is based on the quality of life aspects. You just have a very simple ones. Now one is encephalopathy. Amnesia भी हो जाता है इससे. Dementia is basically a range of disorders. Forgetting, or you can say memory disorder, is one part of it. Like in Alzheimer's, dementia occurs, and there's a lot of other mental disorders in which dementia is a part. So encephalo means inflammation हो जाती है neurons में, उस वजह से आपकी memory alter हो रही है. So where we use common diagnostic procedures which includes MRI, CT scan, PET scan, general X-rays भी use हो जाते हैं. These are the techniques when there is a physiological disorders in the brain. And the last part is forgetting, which is mild cognitive impairment. So sleep patterns और also studies की disturbed sleep में भी हमारी memory पूरी तरह से काम नहीं करती है. We all realize when we are hard pressed with time, we sleep less, and next day is an exam. So there is a difficulty in recalling. So it is advised that we should take proper sleep before the exam. And in conclusion, we should suggest the solutions or ways to keep our memory fit. So first the early diagnosis होना चाहिए, और हमें अपने डाइट का, न्यूट्रिशन का, स्लीप का ध्यान रखना चाहिए. We should use some tools to keep ourselves updated or our memory less burdened. So this is the solution orientation approach for conclusion. And coming to the last question of this video, emotional competency is more important than the intellectual competency. Discuss in context of school children. So in this answer, introduction carries an important weightage, because we should give a kind of introduction which justifies this statement: emotional competency is more important than intellectual competency. So I took data from NCRB report which says कि 2017 से लेकर 2020 तक जो सुसाइड रेट्स है चिल्ड्रन में वो बढ़ता जा रहा है, बस मार्जिनली कम हुआ 2021 में. And the main reason behind it is the failure in examination. And इसका reason clear है, because overemphasis on intellectual competencies. उस वजह से. Then in next paragraph I defined what is emotional competency. These are the competencies that constitute self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills that a person demonstrate at appropriate time and ways in sufficient frequency to effective in a situation. तो situation में कितना effective है, and this definition is given by government. And इसके भी दो aspects हैं, intrapersonal and interpersonal. For example, self-awareness, self-management is intrapersonal. Social awareness, social skills are interpersonal. So EC, see the difference between EI and EC. EI is emotional intelligence and emotional competency. So it is the same difference between science and technology. It is the knowledge about our emotions. It's about what is this, what are emotion, my emotions, other emotions. You know that, but when you apply those ideas, we apply those thoughts, we apply those skills. That is competency. So there's a difference between EI and EC. So we should know that. And now give some empirical evidences why it is important, why emotional competence is important. So I first took the example of माइकल मिशेल लॉन्गिट्यूडनल स्टडी थी फॉर चिल्ड्रन पे, इसको हम मार्शमैलो इफेक्ट भी बोलते हैं, which talks about the delayed personal gratification. एक छोटे से रूम में 4 साल के बच्चों को बंद किया and they were advised not to eat the marshmallow and until the parents came back. So whosoever were able to delay their temptation, who became successful, more happy in their lives. So this was a study. Another aspect is coping with failure. तो Carl Dweck's की research थी on the growth mindset. It also proves that emotional competency क्यों जरूरी है. बच्चों को assertive बनाती है, have better coping strategies, and help to develop the internal locus of control. Yeah. On the similar lines of the marshmallow test, there was a Kitkat test conducted by Michael Chaplin. Based on that, I draw this diagram. There's a lucrative stimulus, might be a Kit Kat or marshmallow. Then there's an aroused emotional state. If we are able to self-control or emotionally regulate ourselves, this is the emotional competency aspect. Then it will help us to develop the locus of control, and we are able to delay the gratification. So the simple flow chart you can draw. And there's an Indian researcher, Vipul Chetra and Sen, said that there's a significant relationship between EC, EI, and subjective well-being. So it also increases the subjective well-being. There was another psychologist, John Freeman. It tells the gifted children जिनको push किया गया youth में कि तुम ज़्यादा achieve करो and you should be more successful professionally. Later we found out that they are more disappointed and somewhat unhappy adults. So these are the different reasoning ki why it's EC is important than intellectual competency. So with those, we said ki emotional competency important and need of the hour, we should focus on it. But we can also add a line ki intellectual competence भी जरूरी है, ऐसा नहीं कि we should neglect it fully. It enhances the self-efficacy and self-esteem of the child. So we should also focus on it, but equally with emotional competence. And to end with कि SDG का prime target है well-being को promote करना of all ages. So if in order to promote well-being, emotional competence is must. So that's all for this question. Hope you get a brief idea about these questions, their themes, and the chapters they are asked, and the content they require, the presentation required, the structure. Hope you all find it useful. So that's all for now. Thank you.